मनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगना रघुनाथान्वितां तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पदान् सहगना ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृष्ण भानु सुत देवे प्रणमामि हरिप्रिय वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. So we were discussing the 8th chapter, and today we have to start from verse 8.15. So I'll share my screen. Okay, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, bro.
Okay, so let's recite this verse. If you like, you can repeat after me. Mamupetya punarjanma
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
दुःखालयम शाश्वतम्
दुःखालयं शाश्वतं
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
दुःखालयम शाश्वतम्
दुःखालयं शाश्वतं
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
दुःखालयम शाश्वतम्
दुःखालयं शाश्वतं
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
दुःखालयं शाश्वतं
दुःखालयम शाश्वतम्
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
संसिद्धिं परमां गताः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
दुःखालयं शाश्वतं
दुःखालयम शाश्वतम्
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः। Anyone else would like to recite?
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
मामुपेत्य पुनर्जन्म
दुःखालयम् अशाश्वतम्
दुःखालयम शाश्वतम्
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
नाप्नुवन्ति महात्मानः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः
संसिद्धिं परमां गतः। Okay, let's recite the synonyms. Mam,
मां
me,
me
upetya,
उपेत्य
achieving,
achieving
puna,
पुनः
again,
again
janma,
जन्म
birth,
birth
dukkhalayam,
दुःखालयं
place of miseries,
place of miseries
ashashvatam,
अशाश्वतं
temporary,
temporary
na,
न
never,
never
apnuvanti,
आप्नुवन्ति
attain,
attain
mahatmanah,
महात्मानः
the great souls,
the great souls
Samsiddhim,
Samsiddhim,
perfection.
perfection,
Paramam,
Paramam,
ultimate.
ultimate,
Gata,
Gataha,
having achieved.
having achieved.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries because they have attained the highest perfection. Purport. Since this temporary material world is full of the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death, naturally, he who achieves the highest perfection and attains the supreme planet Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, does not wish to return. The supreme planet is described in Vedic literature as Avyakta and Akshara and Paramagati. In other words, that planet is beyond our material vision and it is inexplicable. But it is the highest goal, the destination for the Mahatmas, great souls. The Mahatmas receive transcendental messages from the realized devotees and thus gradually develop devotional service in Krishna consciousness and become so absorbed in transcendental service that they no longer desire elevation to any of the material planets, nor do they even want to be transferred to any spiritual planet. They only want Krishna and Krishna's association and nothing else. That is the highest perfection of life. This verse specifically mentions the personalist devotees of the Supreme Lord Krishna. These devotees in Krishna consciousness achieve the highest perfection of life. In other words, they are the supreme souls. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesh Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Hare Krishna. So I read the translation one more time. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries because they have attained the highest perfection. So we are discussing the 8th chapter, which is attaining the supreme. So the theme of this chapter is how to attain Krishna. And we see that Krishna had actually mentioned the essence of this chapter is verses 8.4 and 8.5, where Krishna had mentioned, how we can actually not 8.4, it is 8.5 and 8.6. Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaha prayati samadbhavam yati nashte atra samshayah. That if at the end of the life, if someone is able to remember me, smaran, smaran means to remember, not just chant the name. The mind has to be there when we are remembering Krishna. So remembrance means with our mind we are able to remember him. So at the time of leaving the body, so at that time, we will be able to return back, or we will attain the same nature as Krishna, which is kind of analogous to like going back to the spiritual world. And to re-emphasize this point, he says, Nasti atra samshaya, there is no doubt about it, O Arjuna. And then the entire chapter, Krishna focuses on how can a person actually remember Krishna at the time of the death. So he talks about that, he says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara yuddhacha mai arpit manobuddhir ma mevishir samshas. Therefore, Arjuna, always, sarveshu kaleshu, at all times, remember me and fight. So here, this is clearly Krishna is talking about Bhakti Yoga because remembrance has come first and then fight. Earlier Krishna had mentioned that you do the work and offer the results to me. So first do the work and then remember Krishna at the time of offering the fruits of the work. But here, before even doing the work, remember Krishna and then do your work. So, and then he has talked about that how it is, he understands it's not possible. It's very difficult to do that. So he says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasana anyagamina. Do a practice, Abhyasa yoga. Sadhana, basically he is referring to sadhana bhakti, that be engaged in sadhana bhakti and then with your the practice to let your consciousness not go away anywhere. Chetasa na anya gamina. So if in this way, if you are able to engage yourself, then you will definitely attain the supreme person. So that's how Krishna has put it. So then he talks about how to meditate on himself. Then he talks about how a yogi can remember Krishna at the time of death and leave the body, and then he can attain the supreme destination, prayana kale manasa chalena bhaktya yukta yoga balena cheva. So there, I think Madhavkanta Prabhu mentioned that verse indicates, that's 8.10, indicates about Yoga Mishra Bhakti, that it's not pure Bhakti. It is actually, so there is Ananya Bhakti and there is Mishra Bhakti. Mishra Bhakti where it is not unalloyed devotion. It is mixed with some other processes. So Krishna actually says Bhaktya Yukto. Even the yogi has to have some element of bhakti. Even at the time of their when they're raising the pran upwards, that is their sadhana, trying to raise the pran upwards, even that time they should have some bhakti, bhaktya yukto. Yoga balena chaiva, that's how Krishna puts it. And then Krishna talks about that how ultimately the yogi has to, concentrate his life hair in between his eyebrows. So first, if you remember the 6th chapter when Krishna was describing the yoga process, he talks about that the eyes should be half open, half closed. Then the yogi has to, stare at the tip of the nose. And then that's how he had explained the yoga process. But now he is asking that the prana vayu, the life air has to be raised. So we had discussed that there are different kinds of airs. The 5 prominent airs are pran, apan, vyanudan, and saman. So these are like 5 different vectors which are going in different directions. And wherever the resultant of these vectors is 0, where it is balanced, that's where the soul is situated. And that's why when we say the prana has left, so prana has left means what happens is when the prana vayu leaves the body, along with it the soul also leaves. So that's how the person passes away. He leaves the body. So Krishna talks about that the prana vayu has to be fixed in between the eyebrows, and by the, this is to be done by the strength of yoga. So, of course, we can understand that how much the yogi has to practice. And then remembering Krishna in full devotion, if he leaves the body like that, then he can certainly attain Krishna. So now again, the yogis may or may not be remembering Krishna at the time of leaving the body. They can still do everything except remembering Krishna. So it is explained by the acharyas that in those cases, either they will go to a higher planetary system, one of the upper planetary systems, or they can attain the Brahma Jyoti. So that's how acharya have mentioned. So I'll come to so I know Mataji had described about the Pratyahar in her, Sundari Radhika Mataji had given a nice class about the Sarvadwarani Samyamya Manoridhi Niruddhacha, and the process of, Atyahar, that how the senses have to be controlled. And then the very important verse that last time on Thursday, Srinivasacharya Prabhu had given a very nice class, Ananya Chetaha Satatam Yomam Smarati Nityasaha Tasyaham Sulabha Partha Nitya Yuktasya Yogina. So Nitya Yuktasya Yogina is Srinivasacharya Prabhu had explained that what does it mean. So he was talking about who is Nitya Yuktasya Yogina. He had quoted the verse from the 9th chapter, Mahatmanas Tupam Partha Devim Prakritim Ashritaha Bhajante Anandamaso Gyatva Bhutadim Avyam. Satatam Kirtayanto Mam Yatantascha Dridvataha Namaschantasya Mam Bhaktya Nitya Yukta Upasate. So the Nitya Yukta comes there also in the 9th chapter. So here Krishna had said that, if a yogi is engaged like this Nitya Yukta, then he can easily attain Krishna. So this is the only place, 8.14, where Krishna says that he can be easily attained. But what exactly is Nitya Yukta, that Krishna doesn't talk about here in the 8th chapter. That Krishna talks about in the 9th chapter, verses 13th and 14th. So that Nitya Yukta is basically a description of the Bhakti Yoga process. So if a devotee is always engaged like this in glorifying Krishna, remembering Krishna, Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, Kirtan. So Kirtan has to be done always. Prabhupada says book distribution is also Kirtan. So if you are inspired, you can also do book distribution. That is also a kind of Kirtan. So in that way, a yogi can easily attain Krishna. This is the easy way to attain Krishna. So now we are discussing the 8.15th verse. So in the 14th verse, Krishna had said that I can be easily attained, like this. But what happens after we attain Krishna? So that's what is being described here in the 15th verse that we are discussing. Mamapette punarjanma dukhalayam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmanaha samsiddhim paramam gataha. After attaining me, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Now, this verse is very, very loaded. It's loaded with a lot of philosophy. So when we generally talk, so this is a famous verse, of course. Many devotees like to quote it. Dukhalayam ashashvatam is what we quote. Just one out of the 4 lines we usually quote this. The second line, Dukhalayam ashashvatam. We don't quote the whole verse because we try to focus on that this word is a place of misery. This word is temporary and it's full of miseries, which is true. Krishna is not denying that. But the focus of this verse is not exactly that. Krishna is saying that yes, this word is a place of misery, but if a person is able to attain Krishna, then he will not come to this one. He will never return to this temporary miserable world. So Krishna used the word Mahatmana, Napnuvanti Mahatmana Samsiddhim Paramam Gatah. Now, what is this Mahatma? Mahatma's definition is again given in the same 2 verses that I just quoted, which Srinivasacharya Prabhu had also mentioned on Thursday, which is Mahatmanas tu mam partha devim prakrimashitah bhajante ananya manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam. So one who do bhajan of Kirta with ananya manaso with unflinching mind, undeviating mind, unalloyed devotion, that person is actually Mahatma. And Prabhupada also in his purport, he focuses on that one word, Mahatma. Who is a Mahatma? So he makes it very clear that here Krishna is referring to the personalist devotee. He's not referring to an impersonalist, he's referring to a personalist devotee, because the definition of the word Mahatma comes later in the 9th chapter. So that makes the things very clear. Now also there is a similar word that is used by Krishna, not exactly similar, but very similar. That word is used, that word is sadhu. Sadhu is used in the 4th chapter, if you remember, where Krishna says, who remembers that verse? Anyone like to quote that verse? Very famous verse of the Gita. 4.7. It's very famous verse. Why does Krishna come to the material world? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam. So I come to deliver the sadhus. I come to do the paritranaya, to give pleasure to my devotees. So that sadhu is also, in one sense, synonymous. It's the synonym of the word Mahatma. Of course, Krishna doesn't define sadhu here in the Bhagavad Gita, but sadhu word, I remember Alarnath Prabhu was giving a class and he had defined that word from one of the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. I forgot which verse he quoted. I think it was from one of the 3rd canto verses, where who is a sadhu, that is mentioned. So anyway, we are not going to go into that right now. So we were discussing about, so there are 2 things that are mentioned. That one is, having attained Krishna, a person will never return to this temporary miserable world. Now, sometimes people say that, the Vedic philosophy is pessimistic. So because it, so we know that, sometimes we also quote this verse very heavily, Dukhalayam ashashvatam. There is also a similar verse in the 9th chapter, 33rd verse. If you remember, Kim punar brahmana punya bhakta raj rishyasthatha anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasumam. Anityam asukham lokam. Exactly the same meaning as Dukhalayam ashashvatam. So Dukhalayam means full of miseries, and ashashvatam means which is temporary. So similarly, anityam means temporary, and asukham means a place where there is no sukha. So Krishna in 9.33 he again says that this loka is anityam and asukham. So very synonymous. So twice Krishna actually mentions this. Of course, there are other places where Krishna talks about the nature of this material world. In the 13th chapter, famously, he talks about Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam. So Prabhupada also explains that in the purport. So he talks about the 4 miseries: Janma Mrityu Jara and Vyadhi, birth, death, old age, and disease. So why, sometimes people say that Vedic philosophy is pessimistic. It is not pessimistic, because the pessimism is there, but it's only initial. It's not conclusive. The conclusion there is, Krishna says in the 12th chapter, if you remember, Yetu dharmamritam idam yathoktam paryupasate. Dharmamritam, amrit is like nectar, the nectar of dharma. that is attained through devotion. So ultimately there is nectar, but we have to understand that there is what is the nature of this material world, and that can give an impetus to transcend this material world. So for example, if a patient, he goes to a doctor, and then the patient, he has been diagnosed with, say, cancer. So the doctor has to tell very seriously to the patient that you have got this disease, and if you don't take treatment, then this will happen, you will lose your hair, then your liver will fail, then then your eyesight will go away, then you the burning sensation all over your body, you will not be able to tolerate this pain. So that description of the disease is given by the doctor so that the patient takes the treatment seriously. So similarly, in the scriptures, there is the indication of the nature of the existence of this material world is given, but that is given to give us an indication that actually this word is not the word where we should be. I forgot which verse in the Prabhupada mentions in the purport that this word is not fit for any gentleman to live. Which verse is that? I believe it's in the 10th chapter of the Gita itself. It's there. Very clearly Prabhupada says that this word, no gentleman should live in this word, something like that he mentions. So the point is that, that initial description of the miserable nature of existence in this material world is given so that that gives an impetus to, go beyond this material world. But that pessimism is not final. Now, having said that, there is misery in the material world, and this sometimes this question is raised that, okay, God created this material world, and if God is all good, then why is the material world so bad? And this is one question. Of course, it's not a problem for the Vedic philosophy. Vedic philosophy very categorically answers all these kind of questions, but this has been a very glaring pain point for other religious traditions of the world. Specifically, the major religious traditions are the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Because they don't accept reincarnation, it is very difficult for them to explain why there are certain miseries that come in this world. For example, if there are some children that are born with some deficiencies, some children are born blind, some children have some different kinds of diseases, and if you don't accept reincarnation, it's very difficult for them to explain that why would newborn infant children would have these very terminal diseases also at times. They have not even done any karma so far, why would they get these kind of diseases? So there is this book many of you might have read. It's a very famous book by a Jewish rabbi, where the title of the book is When Bad Things Happen to Good People. So what happened in his case was his own son, he had parjuria. He had become old very prematurely. Of course, he passed away later. So he writes in his book, so they gave very strange reasons to explain the the miserable nature of this material world, to reconcile the goodness of God with the miserable nature of this material world. So he writes in his book that actually it is so I'm just trying to paraphrase him. He says that actually God is good, but he is not all powerful. Sometimes the devil is all the more powerful, and when these miseries come, it is not coming from God, but actually devil is causing these miseries, because he had the idea that he is a God person, God man, as we say. So he is a God man, therefore devil is sending these kind of miseries in his life. So he said that when we are devoted to God, and still if the miseries come in the life, then he says we should learn to forgive God. It is such a what kind of a philosophy is that we can forgive God, because God is not all powerful. Devil is sometimes more powerful. So there are other strange explanations that are given. The Islam religion, it talks about that these miseries in this world are like they are tests from Allah. It is a test that is given. So the test again, it's not a problem as such. Test is fine. We give tests all the time. It's challenging sometimes it's adventurous. We like to get some tests also. But the problem is that differential testing. Why do different people get different kinds of tests? There has to be equal amount of tests that should be given to people. So they clearly cannot explain that why there are miseries in this world. And Islam try to give some logical reason, but again, it cannot explain why there is differential testing. Of course, if a particular philosophical point, it goes beyond a certain point, then they have a standard answer that Saturn has corrupted your mind. So the idea is that stop asking questions because we can't answer your questions. The point is not to demean any religion, but the point is that first of all, these religions have very little philosophy. They have theology, but very little philosophy. So philosophy is the nature of existence, the study of the real nature of existence. That is philosophy. And theology means it is knowledge about God, understanding about God. So these religions definitely have theology. Of course, the theology also is very limited. They can't explain how God looks like, what does he do in the spiritual world. Those kind of things are missing. But at least there are certain kinds of theologies mentioned about his nature, that he has the six opulences are there, he's beautiful, he's merciful, he's compassionate, all those things are there. So philosophy is very missing in these religions. So they cannot really explain why there are suffering in this material world. So Prabhupada actually explains at one point in the Sri Ishopanishad, he writes that the miseries in this material world, they serve a very important purpose. Let me bring it up here. I think that is Ishopanishad mantra 11, where Prabhupada talks about it. I'll share my screen. So Prabhupada writes, the miseries of this material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with dead matter. Let me share my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so here Prabhupada says, from his kingdom, the personality of Godhead sends his bona fide servants to propagate this message by which one can return to Godhead. And sometimes the Lord comes himself to do this work. Since all living beings are his beloved sons, his parts and parcels, God is more sorry than we ourselves to see the sufferings we are constantly undergoing in this material condition. The miseries of this material world serve to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with dead matter. So this is a very important statement that Srila Prabhupada makes here. It serves a particular purpose, that it tells us that this is not a place for us to live. We belong to a different realm altogether. So further he says, intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders and engage themselves in the culture of Vidya, or transcendental knowledge. Human life is the best opportunity for the culture of spiritual knowledge, and a human being who does not take advantage of this opportunity is called a Naradhama, the lowest of human beings. So he is quoting the 7th chapter verse. We had discussed it. Namam dushkritano muda prapadyante naradhamam maya aparat jnana asurim bhavamashrita. So this is actually a very important statement. So also, we see in this material world, we have certain diseases which also reminds us of this. So there is a disease that is called as SIPA. So SIPA is a very peculiar disease. Only about 0.1% of the children would have this disease. The SIPA refers to congenital insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis. So what happens in this disease? Insensitivity to pain. So the children, when they're born with this disease, and they don't feel any pain. Whatever happens, they will never feel pain. So when their teeth come, they will just pluck the teeth out, but there will be no pain. And anhidrosis means that they do not secrete, their bodies does not secrete any liquid, and no saliva. Saliva is there, of course, but sweat is not there and tears are not there. So they may run straight into a wall, they may smash themselves into a wall, but they will not feel any pain. The body will bleed, and such children, they cannot live very long because they don't feel pain. They, more often than not, they will expose themselves to certain circumstances where eventually their bodies will be damaged. to a point that it is irrecoverable. So these children usually live up to 5 years, 10 years, at the most 15 years. So in this material world also we see that the pain serves a particular purpose. The purpose is that it helps us to not expose ourselves to conditions which may damage us. Similarly, at the spiritual level, at the philosophical level, we understand that the miseries in this material world come to remind us of our incompatibility with matter. So we are spiritual beings, we are spirit soul, and we are in this material body, and we are essentially incompatible with this material body, because you remember in the second chapter when Krishna, I think someone needs to go on mute. There's a lot of background noise that is coming.
Sorry.
So in the second chapter, there is the description that comes where Krishna analyzes the nature of the body and the nature of the spirit, of the soul. So everything that he mentions about soul, completely opposite, he mentions about the body. So matter is destructible, soul is indestructible. So the soul cannot be cut to pieces, it cannot be burnt, it cannot be dried with air, but everything opposite is true for the body. So essentially, there is essential incompatibility between matter and spirit. Essential incompatibility. Sometimes, when people get married, they try to make matches. They do all the sorts of horoscope matching and whatnot to make sure. Of course, in India primarily, so they want to make sure that there is they are compatible. But there cannot be any compatibility, because there is essential incompatibility in this material world. Only thing that they could have is minimum incompatibility. So because what happens is the person A and person B, if they're trying to get married to each other, person A is a spirit soul, and he is in a body which he is incompatible with. Person B is in a body which he or she is incompatible with, and they are trying to make compatibility with each other. So that's not going to work actually, because they both are inherently incompatible within their own body. Now after we understand that there is a particular purpose that the pains serve, we are discussing about the how the different religions, they try to explain the nature of this material world, the miserable nature of this material world. They try to reconcile it with the goodness of God. So Acharya explained that this material world is, so we see that in this material world there is also things which work systematically. There is also order. We get rain, we get air, we get food. Everything is happening at a particular time. So there is a lot of order also. The sun comes out at a particular time, and the very fact that the science can predict that, okay, tomorrow at this particular time the sun will rise, and at this time it is going to set. So they can predict it because there is an order. If there had been no order, then they wouldn't have been able to predict it. They are able to accurately predict when the rain will come, what time the rain will start, what time rain will end. To that extent, they're able to predict different natural conditions. So this also indicates that there is order in this material world, but along with order there is also suffering. So the acharyas explain that there are two kinds of places like that, where there is an existence of order, and along with order there is also suffering. So the first place is actually a prison house, so like Durga Devi, so Durga. So this material world is also referred to as Durga. It is considered that this world is like a prison house, where the rebellious souls, they have been in this material world, and the idea is that it's like a correctional facility where they are trying to correct themselves. So in a prison house there is order. The prisoners they will have a particular place to live, they will get food on time. Of course the food may not be very opulent, but the food is provided to them. They will have their own clothes, they will do certain things at certain time. And so there is a lot of order, but everything is under suffering. So of course no analogy can fully convey the essential import of the real nature. These are just explained to give us an indication of what exactly is the nature of existence in this material world. Another such place where order is there, but there is, along with order there is also misery, that is hospital. Hospital also we see there is medical staff is there, and they run the hospital very nicely. It's very clean, it's very orderly. The doctors come on time, the nurses are coming to check the patients at time. On particular times they will come and see, make sure that everything is going okay. But everything is actually suffering, because the patients and whoever are people who are living in the hospital or who are admitted to the hospital, they have been admitted because they are suffering with something. So the suffering is there, but along with it there is also uh, order. So the idea is, when they give these kind of examples to explain the nature of the existence of this material world, they try to explain that, no, it's not that God is bad. It's, they try to explain that, okay, we have to understand that we have a particular disease and we are trying to get rid of this particular disease. Krishna also talks about that, how we all are suffering from these things, primarily lust, anger, greed, pride, envy. These are all kinds of diseases, and they are essentially caused because of our misidentification with the body. So the essential disease that all of us are suffering with is bhavaroga. Bhavaroga is the material existence. Material existence is caused by our identification with the material body. The soul wants to enjoy the material world, and because it wants to enjoy the material world, it gets caught in the material nature. Purushaha prakriti stohi bhunkte prakriti jan gudan karan guna sangosya sad asadyoni janmasu. This verse 13.22 explains how the soul gets trapped in the material existence. So that is the primary disease that all of us have. And then the symptoms are there. Everyone will show different kinds of symptoms. Some people are proud, some people are envious, some people are very angry, some people are dusty. So all of these are essential symptoms of our disease, but the disease is common. So, once we understand that we have this disease, then we can try to get cured of this disease. So this disease can be cured by surrendering to a spiritual master, and then taking the proper medication. Medication is, in the sense, the spiritual master will tell us that, okay, you need to do this and you don't need to do this. So we have been given our own do's and don'ts by Srila Prabhupada. So that is, in one kind, it's like a spiritual treatment that is being given to us. And if we take this spiritual treatment seriously, then we can actually come out of this material world, which is full of miseries and which is temporary. So having said, I just take a break and see if there are any questions or comments, or if anyone would like to add anything. So in the next few verses, Krishna is going to give more details about this material world, and then he will contrast it with the nature of the spiritual world. So next 3 verses, again, he will talk more about that, how, from the highest planet of this material world to the lowest, death takes place, and then he'll talk about that, how even Brahma has a particular lifespan. So he'll give more details on this, that what exactly is the Dukhalayama Shashvatam here. So, but are there any questions, any comments? Anyone would like to add anything?
Very nice explanations, Ganpati Govind. And these are my favorite lines, right? Dukhalayama Shashvatam.
Yeah.
What's your favorite lines in the Bhagavad Gita?
Next verse is Pyari Prabhu's favorite verse. He quotes that. He quotes that. Yeah, Avurbhu Naloka Punaravartino Arjuna. He quotes it multiple times.
Because I have full experience of the Dukhalayama Shashvatam. But yeah, 2 points. First of all, yeah, a lot of Christians, whenever they see something like children born, in misery, they try to explain it off by saying that God has a plan for each of us. You know what I'm saying? And we should just accept God's plan. So that is kind of their general statement, which doesn't explain everything, but in a sense, at least it's in the mode of humility, what I'm saying, to some degree. Yeah. Then this morning we were actually, I had to speak on the Bhagavad Gita 9.9 verse, and I had to read up on it a little bit, Srila Prabhupada's purports and Chaitanya Charitamrita's purports, And in that it says very clearly that this material world is not created by Krishna because he wanted to, you know what I'm saying? Right. It's created for us because we wanted to enjoy separate from him,
Right.
So in a sense, it's like a correction center, so to speak, that was created for us. So he's not directly involved with it in any way, shape, or form, except that he very mercifully and kindly comes with us as the Paramatma in every single soul, to direct us. And the moment we have some inclination to turn towards him, he helps us to come back to Godhead, which is our original constitutional position, So that it was very clearly stated in that purport,
There is
that-
also a direct verse that comes in the Gita. I forgot which chapter. Dharyate Jagat. That's how it comes. Dharyate Jagat is that the living entities are sustaining this material world, but then actually that is Krishna mentions it in a kind sarcastically, because
I
maintaining
was
this
just going
material,
to say, how could that be that
right?
living entities are sustaining this?
Sustaining in the sense that for them this material world is being sustained because they want to
Right,
enjoy in
for
this
them,
material
this
world.
material
So,
world is being sustained. Yeah,
so Dharyate Jagat, something like that verse is there. I'm missing which
yeah.
chapter it is. Otherwise I would have pulled it up right away. But yeah,
And then, yeah,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Mataji. No, go ahead, Mataji.
No, and then after talking about that verse this morning, I was thinking about that verse all day, and I was looking at a very nice picture of mine in the house, where I'm dressed like beautifully in a beautiful sari, really, really dressed up because it was a nice occasion. I don't know if it was my daughter's wedding, it's one of the pictures, and my husband is dressed in a turban in a nice, like looking like a king and queen kind of picture, And I looked at that picture, Ganapati Govind, and I just had this epiphany or this kind of realization. I looked at that picture and I said, that picture is really not me. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
Yeah.
and then I thought to myself, oh my God, there might be other pictures of me somewhere from my past life. You know what I'm saying? That there are so many pictures of me in different forms. So that form that I looked at in that picture is really not me.
Right.
I'm leaving that form. And so this me has been traveling in all these different forms. Whereas when we look at our pictures, especially our pictures where we are nicely dressed and looking beautiful, we think it's us, And I just came to my realization that that picture is not me. It almost felt like an out-of-body experience, and almost like who is that picture,
Krishna says that in the Gita, Dehinosman yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara tatha dehantar
Right.
Yeah, it's very true, Mataji. Very true realization. I also, when I
Yeah,
look at my old pictures, it looks like some other person. Actually, it's
some
not
other
me.
person, yeah.
Because you look very different in those pictures. So
But also it was kind of like a little bit of a scary thought. If that's not me, then who am I? Where am I going? Where am I going?
yeah, actually, Krishna uses these kind of analogies to nail this point down. That if you really meditate on these verses, Dehinosman yatha dehe, the soul passes through the body when the body is like a child, then youth, then old, but the soul remains the same in the body, but the body is
Right.
changing constantly, and the time of death we transmigrate to another body. So these are very sobering verses to meditate on.
I almost wanted to do like a Photoshop, you know what I'm saying? Put my face on like a different kind of body, like, oh, this is what I could have been in my last life. And God forbid I was in, some dog's body or some other body. You don't know where you have traveled and where you have gone, like Purandar Dasa or Kanakadasa actually has a song, Nana Deshagalali, Nana Yonigalali, so many yonis and so many countries have I traveled, and finally, and I left Yogesha's Anandapura to travel through all these different, countries and wombs, different bodies.
Mataji, I'm driving, but I just wanted to say real quickly that you hit a breakthrough.
Yes. I don't know. I keep hitting breakthroughs and then fall back again.
Once you ask yourself that question, who am I? That was your breakthrough. Keep asking yourself that question.
I've been asking that question for a long time, Kwaka Prabhu.
I found that verse where Prabhupada talks about no sane gentleman will. So it's 9.33 only actually. The purport
Mhm.
Prabhupada says that in this material world there are classifications of people, but after all, this world is not a happy place for anyone. It is clearly stated here, Anityam Asukham Lokam. This world is temporary and full of miseries, not habitable for any sane gentleman.
Gentleman.
Sane gentleman, he said that. That means if you're insane, that means
So
only
I
then
guess
you
we're insane.
only then you may want to stay here. If you are sane, then you will not want to stay in this material world. So
So true.
sometimes Prabhupada puts it in a positive
I
way, sane
know.
gentleman.
He doesn't mince words.
Also, you were talking about Christian Mata. So they also, I understand. So different people give different kind of explanations. But if you look at their philosophy, so their philosophy is that again, God is not in control of this world. Satan is in control of this world, because when Adam and Eve, they have chosen the forbidden apple. At that time, they had surrendered to Satan, and from then on, Satan has taken control. So all the miseries so they try to explain that the miseries are not caused by God, but they are caused by Satan. So then the point is, if God is not in control of this material world, then what is the point in worshiping him?
Right.
So, and see, these explanations that are given by them, these have been they have caused a lot of pain for these religions, because people in large numbers from these religions, because of these kind of explanations, they have turned to atheism. Because they think that what kind of God is it, if it's not in control, and if he's just arbitrarily sending these kind of things on people.
My neighbor is an atheist, and she says all the time, she says, like, whenever I say, like, oh, I'm praying to God, it says, oh, it's God that's doing it for you, not you. Your effort is not doing it. She thinks, like, why are you thinking it's God doing it and not your own effort?
So they say it's like a divine caprice, capriciously God is sending these kind of, without any, arbitrarily, without any logic, because they don't accept
she's kind of like a
reincarnation.
Shunyavadi, like the Buddhists. They feel like there's nothing, nihilism, you know what I'm saying? After death, there's nothing. Yeah.
So, but in the Vedic philosophy, we can understand very clearly that it is not due to God, it is not due to us, it is not due to God, or it is not by chance that it is all happening. It is because of our own past karma that we have to suffer sometimes in this material world. Of course, there are two elements. One is the nature of this material world. There is death, old age, disease, and birth. But besides that, the other sufferings that come, that is because of our own karma, not because of anything else. Anyone else would like to add anything? Any questions, comments? Okay, the next verse is a little long, so I don't think we will have time to finish it. So if there are no questions or comments or anything, then we can stop here maybe. Okay, all right, then we can stop here. Thank you everyone. Thank you for joining. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Ananta koti vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Ganapati Govind Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna, everyone.